Hello YouTube. I've been requested quite a lot to make a video discussing my build. To sort of preface a lot of this, I play pretty much nothing but Excalibur. My build and times playing this game is almost exclusively Excalibur, and to be more specific, it's exclusively melee only. So, to get started, I'll show you, even though I'm using Prime, I'll show you a variation that is more easily translated to Umbra. So this would obviously be supplemented by Warrior's Rest. You want to use that for this build. There's various reasons for it. So to get with that out of the way, I'll throw back on what I run. And then the other thing to demonstrate is you want to run Unaru. For two reasons that Unaru is important. For knockdown immunity, that's very important for melee builds. You otherwise run into this issue quite often, especially with this most recent update with how powerful Exalted Blade is. And then the other reason is for where is it? Is for your immunity. So this is a way out, which you kind of need as Excalibur, and I'll demonstrate why this is one of the best ways to do it. What I'll do though is change to what I run. So for anyone that actually does have Excalibur Prime, this is my recommendation: run Vazarin and Prime Sured-Footed. For Umbra, you run Warrior's Rest and Unaru. That out of the way, get into the build. Conveniently for most of the people that are going to be playing this Warframe, you're using triple Umbral mods. So the reason behind this, I think people overrate in general how important having high shields are. With even base shields, 1.4 seconds and vulnerability period is quite nice. Even with that, the amount of shield gating you can get just with brief respite and casting abilities and maintaining your energy, it makes it surprisingly easy to stay relatively tanky. What also supplements this and what fundamentally changes this is slash dash having shield immunity. So you don't have to worry about running into the scenario where you come out of a slash dash, whether it's a long chain or even a short chain, and then just immediately taking health damage. What does make this overall easy is Radio Blind or Howl. Radio Blind or Howl is very quick to cast, even without casting speed or with any casting speed shards or using Maturai baseline. It's very quick. It generates a sufficient amount of shields to provide enough defensive ability while also providing CC for most enemies. Wrathful Advance can also do this to some extent, but this is independently significantly more important for other reasons that we'll get into. The other thing that a triple Umbra mods gives is it gives you a significant bonus to your ability strength. Yes, you could supplement that with replacing these other mods, but on top of that extra strength, the health and armor that you get is sufficient in most content to survive against Toxin. And where this becomes important is in 1999, there's a significant amount of Toxin damage that you do take. Steel Path face-offs notably having a decent amount of enemies that do Toxin damage. On top of this, if the limiting factor is Toxin, you're generating shields, providing enough shield tanking, being able to survive through a couple of Toxin ticks up to level 2 or 3,000 sometimes is far more useful than if we were to remove both of these mods, losing 33% ability strength, and then replacing this with adaptation or some other defensive mod, or even potentially freeing up a mod slot for an augment, and I'll discuss why that's not necessary here soon. So overall, in my testing, this is by far the best layout for it. What I have been using as a control and what I do very frequently remove is triple Umbra mods from Excalibur Prime, but I've been using Umbra as a way to control for this and test around this without having to drown all of my Umbral Forma into just Excalibur Prime. Back to this build. Chromatic Blade, this is effectively required with Encore's update. Encore's update makes this one of the most significant upgrades to Excalibur just in general. Reason being, it fully applies to slash dash. Slash dash appears to have the 15% status chance and crit chance and 2x multiplier that Exalted Blade has. It seems like DE just copy and pasted those values. Before it had 0%. Now that it has base stats and through testing, through isolated testing, it appears that it fully applies Chromatic Blade's status chance bonus to slash dash. So Chromatic Blade doesn't just buff Exalted Blade, it also fully applies and buffs slash dash. And this is independent of whether Exalted Blade is drawn or not. So this is effectively required now. I would say if you had one mod choice, one augment choice to possibly get and to use for Excalibur, it would be this. The rest of them I'll discuss here in a moment. Prime Flow, this is required for not only maximum energy pool, but also because this is the optimal the optimal Archon Shard strategy by a lot, and that's supplemented by Wrathful Advance. So you need max energy in order to meet that requirement. The problem that Excalibur runs into is, let's say you were using battery. Unless you have another source of armor or max energy, you don't reach that. And you can do this with Unaru. This is where Umbra has a slight advantage, or if you're not running Prime Shirt-Footed and you're running Warrior's Rest, or in my case, if I'm running Power Drift, you can meet this, but it's not worth it overall. And this has to do with the fact that a single heat stack will eliminate this advantage. A single heat stack will, even with Warcry, even with supplemental, even with a decent amount of extra armor, it will prevent you from meeting that bonus. And that's more important overall for Wrathful Advance. Let's say if you were running Warcry, which is viable but not nearly as powerful, or something like Nourish, it would be a lot more significant running Wrathful Advance with how much that adds to the crit tier. Normalize this again real quick. Prime Continuity, this overall is quality of life. There's been periods where I've not run extra ability duration. I find it to synergize well and sort of balance out energy consumption, ability duration overall. I don't know precisely, I don't know if this has been confirmed or not, but with the changes to combo duration for pseudo exalted or now proper exalted abilities, it's supposed to increase the combo duration, but this is very hard to control on Excalibur. It's not very overt right now how this interacts, or even if Slash Dash has its own combo. It's very hard to tell. But overall, having extra ability duration is a significant improvement to the overall energy economy and playstyle of Excalibur. Equilibrium, this outperforms everything else by a mile, including Arcane Universal Fallout. Let's say if you were running Radiation Electric on your Exalted Blade, this doesn't even compare. This is hit or miss in comparison to something like Equilibrium. This is by far the best way to generate energy and maintain energy, and also in this case maintain health, which it's noticeable, but it's not perfect at maintaining your health, but it does supplement it. Blind Rage is important for two reasons. There's practically nothing else in this slot that outperforms it, whether that's a different augment. Let's say if you were trying to run Furious Javelin instead of subsuming off Radio Javelin, if you're trying to run that augment. Ability Strength, effectively a whole crit tier, and 300% status chance is going to outperform that significantly. This is just, it's too good not to use. If you're not running something like Equilibrium, if you're sacrificing some of your energy economy, this becomes unusable. So that's where the combination of Equilibrium and Blind Rage are very important in order to maintain energy economy. The negative ability efficiency does help with Brief Respite. It obvious synergy between those two. I think it's important for that as well. Not just the strength, but the negative efficiency. Going to Arcanes, this is where there's some variability. So I've run something like Bellicose as a way of simplifying and sort of streamlining the testing instead of having to get 250 kills. This with Excalibur makes it effectively about 100 kills equivalent, and amount of missions, let's say normal missions you're running, that you're getting more than 100 kills is pretty low. So this is a viable option as well. The other argument for just maintaining multi-augmented is where this matters, you're going to have 250 kills, so you might as well just run it if this is the best answer. The other arcane slot is occupied by one or two different types of arcanes, and technically bellicose can go in here. There's some variability within there, but what you want to use is either Arcane Strike for the attack speed, or you want to use Arcane Fury. And where that becomes important is mostly having to deal with how restrictive modding is on Exalted Blade. In the current build of the game right now, you really want to have Blast on it. And so having 60/60 mods, specifically 60/60 mods, I wouldn't recommend using the 90% mods. The extra status chance and also the way it biases between electric and blast, this is a better proportion in my opinion, with the strength going scaling up, and with Galvanized Elementalist. If I remember the math, this gets electric to like 95% approximately, effectively 100% for electric, meaning that you're going to proc electric pretty much every time you are hitting with Exalted Blade. And then you're obviously guaranteed to proc at least one blast, if not two, depending on what your status chance really ramps up to and what content you're in. So when discussing between Arcane Fury and Arcane Strike, I personally don't like conditional attack speed. I find it difficult to maintain the fluidity of melee gameplay. So I use Prime Fury. The Berserker Fury is obviously higher value, up to 70%. I just don't like it. I don't like conditional, and that same thing goes for the Arcane slot, since Arcane Strike is conditional based on you doing damage. The variation of this is if you could use Condition Overload instead of Primed Fury, which also makes it a little bit more beginner friendly. This a lot easier mod to get than this if you haven't been playing for a while. So you can supplement Condition Overload in there, and then instead of using Arcane Fury, you would use Arcane Strike. The other reason why I use this, there's more than just that reason. I'll get to in a moment. We'll continue back into Exalted Blade here. Discussing some of the rest of these mod choices, one of the variations on this build that is viable, if this is what you prefer, it really, I think the margins between them are so small that it comes down to personal preference. And this variation would be between Galvanized Steel and Blood Rush versus something like the Sacrificial set. So if you do the math for it, these come out to about the same when you're at base 5x combo, but this scales higher whenever you're not stacking combo, which it's very easy to be able to lose combo with Exalted Blade, whether that's decasted or when you're initially casting it, maybe only getting a few kills. So this scales higher overall on average. The absolute min-maxed version of this, though, is running Galvanized Steel and Blood Rush, and this is assuming that you have regular scenarios that you're maintaining 12 by 220. This is where I prefer this setup, because baseline it's nearly equivalent to this, but then what this allows you to do when you run these sacrificial mods is if you wanted to sacrifice Arcane Fury, depending on your equip melee, which is, spoiler, the reason I'm running this is also because of my equip melee, but because you have some amount of plus melee damage, you can sacrifice Arcane Fury for something like Bellicose. This will baseline give you a lot more strength. If you do the math for it, this 25% increased strength gives you another 25% crit chance, but then it also gives you, if I remember the math for it, 72% status chance, which additive status chance for that. So even less if you do the math for it to reduce it down. So another like 10% status chance on Exalted Blade. Still very capable. Strength overall scales very highly on Excalibur now because of how many things benefit from strength, which is pretty much every single ability, excluding Radio Blind. So that's at least one variation there. This is what I found to prefer. This is just overall more versatile, and the same thing with this variation of the build. So either way works. I think the actual mathematical difference between them is marginal. It might depend on preference, what you prefer. I would overall say though, if you're not someone that is like me, that is very that dislikes conditional attack speed because of how it affects the move sets and stance combinations and mobility overall within the game, then replacing this for condition overload or just Berserker Fury. So to get into the other reason why I run Arcane Fury over Strike is because I don't have any additive melee damage within this build. The Riven is purely elemental, and then there's no other addition to it. There is the plus 100 melee damage that you get from the Incarnate Evolution. That's very small. The extra 180% scales really well for the Toxin Clouds, which this build is based around being able to use the Toxin Clouds as a form of ranged ability, of a general form of control. It does a very good job at self-sustaining themselves. Vortex, the clouds don't proc influence. They nerfed that a while back. It was only lasted for a couple weeks. Very overpowered, but melee Vortex does proc off the clouds, so the clouds can drag enemies into them and then stack those enemies and kill those enemies and then spawn more clouds and rinse and repeat. And in some scenarios, it is self-sustaining. What makes this a lot easier is you don't need a Riven like this in order to make this build work. Before, you were sacrificing somewhere in order to be able to get cold and electric. What makes this easy for every player pretty much is that. All you need is to transplant that mod in, and then boom. It also gives you more attack speed, which I think most players prefer higher attack speed than lower attack speed or moderate attack speed. I sort of differ in this, that I base my attack speed heavily around the fluidity of the gameplay. So that is the easy drop-in replacement. This is also the variation that I usually link to people when they ask for it. So giving yourself some extra melee damage. This wouldn't be necessary if you were running Arcane Fury. So that would free up a mod slot for you to be able to run increased, in this case, increased attack speed, since this might not be 20% might not be enough for a lot of players. Let's go back to, let's see what's next. Focus School. So I run Vazarin. I don't think Narrabin's very useful here. That just has to do with the fact that if you're running level cap missions, you're not running primaries and secondaries. This is intentional for quality of life, since if I'm playing melee only, I don't want to have these primaries and secondaries equipped. But potentially a little known advantage of this is that when you get reactant bonuses, when you get your 10 reactant, the bonuses you get are conditional on what you have equipped. So if you don't have a primary or secondary equipped, the only options for those are the strength and range bonus, the double strength and range, or melee damage. So that's it's significant enough to where you don't want to equip things. I don't think that bonus is worth losing or gambling with either one of those bonuses to just have dexterity mods for increased combo duration. But if you're someone that is equipping primaries and secondaries on Excalibur, I would suggest playing a different Warframe potentially, but that's just me. This is the way I played the game for over 11 years. So that's the reason behind that. Vazarin's nice because you get the immunity. It's a lot more reliable immunity using the Void Sling. But because of the limitation on Warrior's Rest and with Umbra, you really do want to use Unaru. You want to be able to have that knockdown immunity. And there is also this, which I used heavily until Jade Shadows. Until Jade Shadows, I was running Unaru for its armor strip for things like demolition units and disruption missions. So I have a lot of experience using Unaru. I would say it's on par, it's not as reliable. The main limitation of this is that you're more than likely spending more than 5 seconds in operator, so you lose damage uptime, but then you're also potentially losing your combo duration. So that's a disadvantage of running Unaru. If you're able to reliably get a low time of death, I guess you could call it, a low time of death on this reinforced returns, then it would make then it makes it very easy. Like if you're in really high level mission where pretty much enemies just have to look at you and you're just waiting for shield gate duration. Merriman is viable, but I don't think it's worth it overall. I don't think with this base that it's worth it. It is still relatively easy for you to generate combo, but I make the argument when it comes to combo generation that if you need the combo duration in order to kill things, then you're going to generate it. If there's tanky enough enemies to justify having a higher amount of stacks of combo for Blood Rush and or Weeping Wounds, then it's a self-correcting issue. The enemies will stay long alive enough for you to generate combo, and you'll maintain that combo for that duration. And when you don't need that combo, it'll drop down to baseline, which in this case is 5x, which 5x gives you enough between Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds. 5x gives you a lot. It also makes it easy if you accidentally heavy attack and you're at high combo. You don't lose all of your combo. It's solid mod overall. I think it's worth slotting in, especially with the low combo duration. In discussing combo duration on dual Ichor, this, because we're not running Influence and because we're running Toxin and Magnetic, this instantly generates combo up to 12 by 220. You can heavy attack, and if there's enough clouds, because the clouds will also proc this, you can heavy attack with no heavy attack efficiency and immediately be back at 12 by 220. It's a very powerful evolution. I think this single-handedly is worth using Vortex over something else, especially now with the magnetic mod making it so easy to get. And then in combination with that, you get extra combo duration natively on dual Ichors. This makes maintaining your combo even easier. And then just for demonstration, this is the obvious answer to this. Before this patch and after the patch, this is the obvious answer. Some of the other ones that you can use, Matter Eye is entirely viable here. If you're someone that wants to run Matter Eye, you can do that. I don't think it's necessary at all for Void Cascade. I've run Steel Path, Omnia, Void Cascade, a level cap multiple times with even Nariman and Vazarin dozens of times. Unaru a few times, not as much since that didn't come out until after Jade Shadows when I stopped really running Unaru. You don't really need that much as long as your amp's good and you've got the timing right. You don't need Matter Eye for Void Cascade. The advantages of Void Cascade, if you want the extra strength is obviously powerful. I don't think it's necessary, but it would be the sort of sweaty min-max option, Matter Eye, and that's in combination with Void Strike if you use this offensively with your Warframe. Very, very powerful. The only downside, I think, and this has to do with similar problems to conditional attack speed, is where is it? It's the increased casting speed bonus. The increased casting speed bonus for me, it negatively impacts your slash dash. It ends your slash dash animation in a weird way that makes it hard to use reliably or hard to time reliably when you're doing very efficient mobility mechanics using slash dash in combination with rolls and such. It affects the ending part of the animation where you actually get less distance with it seems. So that's one of the reasons why I've kind of stayed away from Matter Eye, otherwise I would use it. It just negatively impacts the overall fluidity of the build. The last thing I'll go over before we get into the last thing I'll go over before we get to the companion setup is discussing specifically Wrathful Advance. So Wrathful Advance, I'm not using Wrathful Advance as a heavy attack ability. I don't know if a lot of people have this stance for it. I'm using it almost exclusively to to get the extra critical chance. And in doing that, what I highly recommend is ability. I think it shows under. So you want to reverse or do the inverted tap and hold. And then the other very impactful thing is if your mouse and keyboard key binding this ability to something like scroll up or scroll down. Scroll up and scroll down haven't been useful since, I guess, really the beta, when you would maybe have one ability and then the way the keybinds were set up, just completely different. I would highly recommend having alt keybinds for various abilities. This on Dante is an absolute game changer, I'll tell you, because you don't have to sit there and you can keep your mobility keys on WSAD and then just use mouse buttons. So this is what I use. Scroll down for me in Wrathful Advance is very simple. All you do is look at the ground, make sure you try to not target a target if you don't want to accidentally lose combo, because sometimes the targeting for it is very temperamental based on latency and the type of enemy that you're looking at. So in general, this is used as a teleport. I'm mostly looking at the ground and using it, and I'll demonstrate that in gameplay. So with that out of the way, that's something that I find a lot of people don't do and a lot of people don't know about. Highly recommend using it that way. I think it's far more powerful with its crit chance than it is as a heavy attack. Sometimes it's difficult to land them just in general, but let's say about half the time, if I have a Tennokai proc, I'll sometimes Wrathful Advance to target instead of using a general heavy attack, which Exalted Blade makes not as important now with its effectively a ranged ability. So lastly, what I'll get into before gameplay is the companion. So the other thing I didn't mention about the advantage of Triple Umbra mods is that it makes it easier for you to run whatever companion you want. Before the most recent rework with companions, it was questionable whether or not you would run, let's say, a Kavat or any of the beast types. With Resourceful Retriever, I don't see a reason not to use it. There's also a few other mods I'll demonstrate, but these having triple Umbral mods gives you the flexibility of running whatever companion you want. If you want to run a Kavat, if you want to run a Sentinel, you can run any one of these. If I do equip a Sentinel, this is what I run. I'll just show this real quick. You can pause. The important thing to note about this ribbon is it's a greater than 257.2% crit chance to be able to proc Tenacious Bond. If you don't have that, then sacrifice something here, I guess. The build that I recommend running, though, is actually Smita, and there's a few reasons why. So yes, Charm doesn't have the increased drop rate or increased bonus double loot, quadruple loot, but it has all the other buffs, and all the other buffs, especially when you're melee only and you can't get the reload, or you shouldn't still be able to get the reload bonus. The other bonuses that are available are extremely powerful. The shield generation, energy regeneration, increased affinity, those are all very useful. I find it overall to be the most useful precept for Kavats, and I'm using a Kavat also for a very specific reason that I'll demonstrate. Tandem Bod, this significant buff to your companion damage. It also helps generate and maintain your combo. This is noticeable. This is very noticeable in maintaining your combo, especially on Exalted Blade that only has a 5-second duration, base combo duration. Where Equilibrium becomes very powerful is the combination of Duplex Bond and Zip Deconstruct. This is a very well-known synergy between those three mods. This is significant. You really need to have both of these if you're running Equilibrium in order to generate as much health orbs and energy orbs as possible. Resourceful Retriever, obvious. If you have a beast, you have this mod on it. If you're to the point in the game where you're min-maxing a build, you're running a min-max Excalibur build, you're running this mod if you're using a beast. Obvious. Tenacious Bond, the advantage of Smita is you can get this mod very easily with just Bite. The benefit of this mod, you can get at least over that 50% crit chance. And this is impactful between Wrathful Advance, between the fact that you're always critting. This is just a raw damage bonus. Prime Pack Leader, this will guarantee that your companion is surviving through everything but the longest AFK. Like it takes well 5 or 6 seconds for your companion to be fully stripped of both its shields, overguard, and then to the point where it's taking lethal damage. What does help, and this is where also Umbra mod synergize, is that if you're linking fiber and armor, it gives its companions significant amount of health. I find this to be more beneficial than running, let's say, increased shield duration or increasing its shields. And this just has to do with the fact that Prime Pack Leader will maintain its health. If you're running Prime Pack Leader, using shields isn't guaranteed that the companion will be able to properly overguard tanks, since this can drop the overguard quite often. Really using a small shield as a buffer until you're able to apply some more overguard with it. Which this procs off of various things. It procs off the waves. It procs off the clouds. It's very easy to maintain. Getting into claws, this is pretty basic. I just give it as much utility as I can. I'm using heat. Heat's just way too good to use if you don't have another source of heat, the reduced armor. And then where this becomes important with Kavats is this mod. This swipe mod, the increased range and the sort of cleave around it, this appears to proc tandem bond multiple times. Like per enemy that's hit, it'll proc. So it's very, very powerful in generating combo. And this is the reason why I use this, is because it's just swipe on a Kavat with tandem bond is just, it generates far more combo than if you were to use a dog with that. If you did want to use a dog, stock is a pretty obvious one. It doesn't break with slash dash. If you have Exalted Blade and slash dash, as long as you don't use your actual left mouse button or a melee attack, this will stay active the whole time, and then the rest of the build is practically the same. It's literally is the same build as the other one. The other advantage with Harass and Stalk is that it's one of the few dogs that has high enough base crit chance, since not all of them have this, to be able to run Tenacious Bond, which has its obvious advantage. Alright, that's the totality of the build. We'll get into some gameplay. I have a Lich. Well, that will do. Some important aspects of gameplay in general when you're using melee only is understanding the timings of different stances. Not every stance is created equal, and there's some that are dramatic outliers. I think one of those is Carving Mantis that's available on something like Dual Lickers, and that has to do almost exclusively with this forward, left mouse button, and block combo. This, if you wanted to really just be dumb and nothing but this, you could. Note that I do have attack speed bonuses from my own rights, so it's not normally this fast with just plus 55%, but I digress. So in this gameplay, the other significant advantage of the way that Lickers works is you can aim glide attack. This is a little bit more advanced. So instead of being on the ground and attacking, because of the way the stance works, if you bullet jump, aim glide, you can melee while in air. This is a significant benefit to when you're just clearing through the map, attacking enemies. You're having clouds that are stacking enemies together, so you don't have to necessarily kill them in order for them to eventually die to the clouds. Dual Lickers is just very powerful in this. The other advantage between this build with Dual Lickers, to sort of conclude that thought, is between the two different status types. You get Toxin, Magnetic with Dual Lickers, and then you get Blast, Electric. You have a very good coverage of different elements with your melee weapons. As you can see, the procs from the clouds hit very hard, like surprisingly hard. This scales ridiculously if you use Furious Javelin. Before the patch, back in even before 1999, I could get them to hit millions per tick with Steel Path or Cascade. I don't think it's necessary now. I actually tested it today to see. Before I made this video, I tested Furious Javelin again. It's just that's where the current mod configuration is. So let's go to the star of the show. Finally, the star of the show. Now this is just ridiculous, and it's ridiculous because of the fact that they increased the wave speed. if they didn't increase the wave speed, I don't think this would be nearly as powerful as it is, because it's very easy to outrun. The old wave speed, projectile speed, was maybe a third, like half, if not a third of what it is now. It's just very, very powerful, and so you can even go as far as hitting things through walls and killing enemies across the map without Wrathful Advance even. To demonstrate Wrathful Advance, all I do is scroll down, and it just says teleport. You maintain that duration, and you're good to go. And it's as simple as that. That's how I recommend using it. You can, let's say if you get a Tennokai proc, you can use it as a teleport just as easily. It does take aim. It does depend on your latency. I find if it's close, if not over 100 to the host, it's hit or miss whether or not it actually detects the target in time. And as an example here, if you want to just heavy attack, because of this build, using what it has, it's still very capable. So it's overall, I find the mod configuration with Galvanized Reflex to be very impactful here. To demonstrate how ridiculous Exalted Blade is, you can just sit back here and slash away. You need to crouch if you want. You don't want to strafe back and forth to do anything. You can just sit here and attack enemies from ridiculous distances away. Or through walls. The in-glide strategy is also very impactful here. That is an advanced gameplay mechanic, I would say, for melee-only builds. Being able to move faster, since you're not worrying about sprint speed. You're using aim glide velocity in order to increase your actual movement speed there. The combination here with some of the more advanced mobility mechanics, breaking rolls with split slams. Using slash dash as a way to close gaps, as a way to move throughout the map. To get height, because of the way that build's set up, if you've got your 5x by 80, you could easily do a heavy slam into a target and get that extra blast proc. There's a lot of advanced gameplay mechanics that can be done because of how advanced melee mechanics have become over the years in this game. Stances help. Stances are more impactful. I would say stances are the most impactful thing in the game. The three that I would say are the best by far: Carving Mantis for dual swords, Gnashing Pariah, however that's pronounced, for dual daggers for something like Okina. Very, very powerful, which I'll actually demonstrate for those who stick around this long. I'll demonstrate that after this match. And then the third I would say is Vengeful Revenant for dual swords, if you're running Skana, for those that have it, Skana Prime. Or even the new Coda Mire, which is also good.
High security cache. If Furbon charges will get you inside, but you've gotta be quick. They're rigged to self-destruct.
The other advantage here, you probably notice that I use slides quite a lot when I'm using the stance. It's a good way to close a gap, a very small gap. It really depends. The rhythm for it on this a little bit messed up from what I'm used to on the normal star chart. That extra attack speed, sort of a demonstration of that. These should really fix these. I would say the significant advantage of Exalted Blade in this current build of the game, with its significant bonus, is that a lot of these more advanced melee mechanics that you would be using to significantly increase your mobility don't necessarily apply because of the fact that it's more of a ranged ability than it is a melee. You could almost exclusively use Exalted Blade as, well, you could actually exclusively use it as a ranged weapon. Since it generates combo from a distance, you can generate Tennokai procs from a distance. It's really more of a ranged weapon. It's probably, I would say definitively that it is the most powerful melee in the game, at least on Excalibur. I'm not sure about the other ones, but from what I've had other clanmates tell me that do run, people like Wukong and Baruch, that Excalibur's just on a whole different level. Potentially a combination of Chromatic Blade's advantage of eliminating IPS to be able to proc melee moves easier than the rest of them. But if you really wanted, you could just press W, or not even press W, just hold left mouse button the entire time. You don't have to do anything crazy for it. And unfortunately, we didn't get
Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, even wrong ones.
Depending on the enemy, I will regularly switch between dual lurkers and Exalted Blade. That's one of the other advantages of running something like Galvanized Reflex. It makes it very easy for you to quickly get back to a usable combo to get that extra heavy attack damage, Tennokai damage, and then Blood Rush and really cool stance. The thing I've had to get used to is the fact that, at least with these changes, is the fact that I can attack with Tennokai from a distance and actually have it be useful. It's taken me a little bit to get used to that. Since it is now proccing from distance, and then also able to throw that nice little cross wave. So I'll switch to Okina Prime. I'll show that build with its Incarnate and demonstrate how effective the stance is. It's going to have a similar setup. I would say this is an entirely viable option. The specifics behind it, and similar vein to dual Ichors of having status damage type variety. This Riven can be supplemented with pretty much anything. I would say maybe melee damage, maybe just Gladiator Might. Supplement that in there, I would say, if you didn't have a Riven for it. And a lot of this has to do with, we don't necessarily need the extra melee damage here. We don't, because we're running Arcane Fury in this setup. That would be a way where you could get rid of Arcane Fury and switch it around, all that good stuff that I explained earlier. But you do want probably some attack speed in this build. This isn't super impactful, but it does help quite a lot if you're using a more basic sort of style of melee gameplay. But very similar setup. The variation for it is if you wanted to put on like Fever, like Prime Fever Strike, you can get rid of some of your attack speed. I'll demonstrate this. The advantage with running just Toxin with something like melee exposure is you're able to allow the Spectral Daggers, because the Spectral Daggers force cold. The Spectral Daggers with modded on Toxin will proc both Toxin, cold, and viral. How it combines, I don't entirely know, but if you actually look at the status that it applies, it does in fact apply Toxin, viral, and cold. So there's utility within that, and then if you're running melee exposure, you get extra corrosive damage, which this scales insanely. Overall, this build scales higher or better at level cap than something like an influence setup. Very similar setup, except we're running Voltaic Strike. This is largely what I run on Calurvo when I run him, because I run Nairman on Calurvo, and you don't have to worry about combo generation, which is partially why I run Galvanized Steel on this build, since you don't have any necessarily have any innate combo duration increase. You do have combo generation. This is extremely powerful, but I find overall movement speed to be more impactful than the combo time pause. This should work now. This should work. I believe I've tested that. This should work with Exalted Blade to pause your combo when this is considered holstered or when it effectively disappears. But the movement speed, I think, is more impactful for Exalted Blade than pausing your combo on Okina. Because the same idea applies. If you're attacking targets with if you're attacking targets long enough to need that combo duration or to need that max combo 12 by 220, then you're going to generate it very quickly by attacking them when they have slash damage on them. Whether that's from Okina itself with its very with its high slash weighting and with respect to its other IPS, or just through the fact that if you're continuously killing enemies, you're not going to have 5 seconds of downtime to lose all your combo. And the daggers also generate combos. The daggers will do it too. So even if you're within 10 meters of an enemy, as you're approaching on the edge of 5 seconds of losing all your combo, this can satisfy that. And same with slash dash. So enough rambling. We'll run a mission with these instead. I'll demonstrate the daggers doing their job, which is doing an extreme amount of damage in a relatively high amount of AoE, a surprising amount of AoE. It's not that influence is bad on Okina, it's just there's better weapons for influence, I think, and this is better served by maximizing the overall damage of the daggers, because the daggers themselves do a significant amount of damage. So the advantage of dashing is I'm pretty much just pressing W and left mouse button, and then occasionally sliding. And this combination is extremely powerful. It's extremely powerful if you have something like Warcry on Flare because you get that extra movement speed that'll significantly increase your forward mobility, but then also the attack speed. So this is a very, very brainless build that you can set up. This is in combination with Exalted Blade. You can use whichever one whenever you want. That's the advantage of running a melee only build with an equipped melee and Exalted Blade now. And the fact that Exalted Blade is significantly more powerful than others. Aim gliding and using block combos. This block combo is also very good. I would compare it to the other two, which is part of why it's how I consider an S tier stance. The aim glide strategy on this is functional, but there's a disadvantage with sort of the base range of this weapon. I don't find it to be as good as something like Lickers at this.
Health scrubber coming up. Scalding those two. They're coming for you.
The trick to this, and this is the specifics why I talk about gnashing being really good on mouse and keyboard. If you use it on keyboard, you're not allowed to do this sort of straight to be able to maintain the forward block. This is something I've tested on an Ally X on a handheld. What it ends up happening is if you're on a controller and you're using this stance, it turns it into this, which is not very fun. This is a very bad stance. Part of the stance. It's probably the worst part of it. And being able to maintain forward momentum by sort of figure eighting in front of your target, like doing sort of this with your target, it significantly increases the damage of this. As in, you're attacking probably 3 times as fast than if you were sitting there doing this really exaggerated stab mechanic. So that's where I simply don't recommend running this stance. There's a better stance, but there's a better stance if you're a controller. I would potentially even just not run this. How much better this stance is on mouse and keyboard if you're used to it, and switch to a controller, like a handheld, I would just not use it. That's a different story. But you can see with the spectral daggers, they're doing a good job at attacking targets. They do help maintain combo, even when I just lost combo there. But just as a quick demonstration, I'm already getting up there in terms of combo, even after just so that's where I prefer this setup for it. I don't think you need the combo pause. If you were using, there was an argument before the recent change, because it was a stat stick, you can use it as a stat stick. That's what it is. Yeah, entirely viable. Another notable weapon that I'll mention, sort of honorable mention, is if you run Hate Incarnate. When I run Hate Incarnate on this setup, I use it mostly for its utility and single target damage. That involves burning Hate Augment for you to be able to do that, you either need to ensure that you're modding in viral. Problem with viral is that you need sort of a uniform rhythm to actually make that work, since you need to be able to compensate for attack speed for increasing. It's range of the base. That's where, if you're running that setup, just don't run any elements on it. You at least don't want something that is in combination for the same reason that you are combined for projectiles. If you're running a sentinel that can apply it, that simply doesn't matter. A Verglas that'll put everything on. It'll put heat on literally everything. sometimes too much. That's my suggestion when it comes to that's more of an utility than prime of a large shard or a status damage. So far, the easiest way for you to tell whether or not you need to recast Wrathful Advance is when you stop red critting, or you stop seeing the exclamation points from red crits. That's probably the best way to see it. That's usually how I do it, but I usually recast it more often than I should. Just generate a little bit of shields, potentially over shields. Like here, it falls off, and I'm no longer seeing oranges. Orange looks bad. Wrathful Advance to the ground, back up. Because I mentioned it, I'll show the hate builds, and then I'll conclude the video. Feel free to leave any comments or any questions. You can also message me in game. I'm usually on in the evenings in North American time, so if you do have a question, you can just shoot me a private message. So, show this hate build, which I haven't tested since I polarized it with, I think, an Omnia Forma. But this is what I was mentioning. If you don't have a Riven that literally is three mods in one to be able to get attack speed, to be able to get extra range, and then in this case elemental damage to combine with the toxin damage, then I would simply not run this augment, or not run something like Prime Fever Strike. This is a variation I was testing at the time. If you didn't want to run this, probably the easiest way is, instead of magnetic, you run that, and then you could run something like animosity. The other option would be exposure, but I think exposure weighs the heat damage from the projectiles a little too heavily away from being able to maintain this based on its status chance. And so this is what I'd probably recommend. This extreme amount of heavy attack damage. If you wanted a really heavy single target build to synergize or be there as a backup for Exalted Blade, like whenever you get nullified or such. This no longer synergizes, unfortunately, where it passively maintains combo stacks if you're using Exalted Blade and getting melee kills. This no longer works like that since Encore. But you at least have the ability to prime, and I don't think I think with this mod and having Elementalists and the way that these synergize, I don't think you need much combo or even Wrathful Advance to kill things like demolition units. If you gets you close to a demo unit and then you're trying to kill it, and that decasts your Exalted Blade, and then you want to have a backup weapon. So a lot of the times, Dual Ichor isn't the perfect weapon when it comes to killing things like demolition units, whatever they're called. So I'll switch to some sort of glaive or something like hate. So that's one example that sort of detracts from this synergy. In general, you want to have, I would say especially with how powerful Exalted Blade is, you want something with different status type. You can run something like Prisma Skana, which is extremely powerful, and me only being a hunter founder, I don't have Skana Prime. I specifically didn't buy it back in the beta because it wasn't worth the extra $100, and I'm kind of glad I did, because Prisma Skana is in fact better, and the advantage here is you could run, like, at worst, Proccing melee influence on this procs it, or on from Slash Dash or Exalted Blade does proc it globally, so then it'll apply. You could use this sort of like a combo primer for various enemies if this isn't just killing them alone to proc viral. Making this different from Blast I think is beneficial. I don't think if you ran Blast and Electric on your equipped melee that it's worth it. I personally don't think that. I would rather have the different damage efficacy against different types of enemies. That's where I think Toxin and Magnetic to combo with Blast and Electric is just way too powerful to not use. This is just too good. This was the best stat stick before this recent update, and it's pretty much the best melee weapon other than some of the new Exalteds. So, alright, that concludes the video. Thanks for watching.